I never thought that Tuesday would be any different from the hundreds of missions I'd flown before. The briefing room was stuffy as usual, filled with the familiar scent of coffee and tension. Colonel Harrington handed me the classified folder with that look in his eyes, the one that tells you this isn't routine. "You're going in alone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The mission parameters made my stomach drop. Fly deep into contested airspace, gather critical intelligence on a newly discovered enemy installation, and get out before anyone knew I was there. The F-22 stealth capabilities would keep me invisible on radar, but nothing could shield me from visual detection if someone happened to look up at the wrong moment. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders as I studied the satellite imagery. This wasn't just another reconnaissance run. Intelligence suggested this facility was developing something that could change the course of the conflict. I memorized every detail: the approach vectors, the defensive positions, the emergency extraction points if things went sideways. The other pilots in the squadron avoided eye contact as I left the briefing room. They knew the risks as well as I did. In the locker room, I tucked my daughter's small drawing into my flight suit, a ritual I'd maintained for 15 years. The crude crayon sketch of fighter jet with Daddy's plane scribbled underneath had survived 3 combat tours. I hoped it would see me through this one too. Pre-flight checks were methodical, almost meditative. My crew chief, Martinez, worked in silence, both of us understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. Systems nominal, fuel optimal, weapons hot but safetied, he reported, his voice betraying none of the concern I knew he felt. The cockpit of the Raptor felt different that day, both a sanctuary and potentially my final resting place. As I strapped in, I ran my fingers over the familiar switches and displays that had become extensions of my own body over thousands of flight hours. The helmet came down, sealing me in my own world of recycled air and radio chatter. The runway stretched before me like a promise, the early morning light casting long shadows across the tarmac. The takeoff was smooth, the thrust of the twin engines pushing me back into my seat with reassuring force. I climbed quickly to my operational altitude, watching the base shrink beneath me until it disappeared altogether. The radio crackled with the controller's final message: "Ghost Rider, you are cleared to proceed. Radio silence begins in 30 seconds. Good hunting, and come home safe." Then nothing but the hum of the engines and the occasional beep from my instruments. I was truly alone now, heading toward an objective that only a handful of people knew existed. The mission clock started counting down, each second bringing me closer to enemy territory and the unknown dangers that waited there. What I didn't realize then was that crossing that border would change everything I thought I knew about this war. The first indication that something was wrong came 3 hours into the mission. My threat receiver remained silent, but instinct, that unexplainable sixth sense that experienced pilots develop, told me I wasn't alone anymore. I scanned the horizon, my eyes darting between the instruments and the vast expanse of sky surrounding me. Nothing. Then a momentary glint of sunlight reflecting off metal, far to my starboard side. I adjusted my course slightly, pretending I hadn't noticed, while my mind raced through the possibilities. The intelligence briefing had mentioned minimal air patrols in this sector. Either our intel was wrong, or someone had tipped them off. Either way, I was potentially compromised before even reaching the primary objective. My heart rate increased, but my breathing remained steady, years of training kicking in automatically. I decided to maintain course for another 5 minutes before executing a series of pre-planned evasive maneuvers that would tell me if I was being tracked. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. For minutes. 3, 2. The radar warning receiver suddenly screamed to life. Someone had just painted me with targeting radar. So much for the F-22's vaunted stealth capabilities against whatever advanced system they were using. I pushed the stick forward and rolled hard right, diving toward a band of clouds below while deploying countermeasures. The G-forces pressed me into my seat as the horizon spun wildly. "Ghost Rider, be advised, you have company." 2 bogies approaching from Vector 270 came an unexpected transmission, breaking radio silence. It was Jenkins from AWACS, his voice tight with concern. They must have diverted the surveillance plane to my sector when signs of trouble appeared. Roger that. I see them. I responded, though in truth I couldn't yet, but I knew they were there. I leveled out at 15,000 feet, skimming just above the cloud layer, giving me options either to climb back into the clear air or disappear into the concealment below. The mission parameters flashed through my mind. Complete the objective at all costs. But first, I needed to deal with my unwelcome escorts who had now appeared as small dark shapes against the blue sky, closing fast. They were MiG-35s, newer, highly maneuverable Russian-made fighters that our forces had encountered with increasing frequency. Their pilots were good, but I trained against this aircraft type in numerous exercises. I knew its weaknesses: slightly reduced visibility from the cockpit's right rear quadrant and a tendency to bleed energy in sustained tight turns. As they approached, I could see they were setting up to bracket me. One would stay high while the other dropped below, a classic maneuver to limit escape options. I waited until they committed to their positions before making my move. With a quick prayer and my hand steady on the controls, I yanked the Raptor into a high-G climbing turn that would either shake my pursuers or lead to a confrontation that could compromise everything. The MiGs responded exactly as I'd hoped, splitting up to maintain their advantage, but momentarily creating a gap I could exploit. I pushed the throttle to military power, not yet engaging afterburners, which would create a heat signature visible for miles. Banking hard into the gap, I positioned myself behind the lower MiG, closing the distance rapidly. My weapon systems came online automatically, targeting solutions appearing on my heads-up display. Taking out one would simplify the equation, but firing would announce my presence to every sensor in the region. Instead, I needed to convince them they'd lost me, allowing the mission to continue. I pulled up sharply, climbing vertically into the sun, an old trick, but effective when executed with precision. The G-forces crushed me against my seat as the altimeter spun wildly. 6 Gs. 7. Black spots appeared at the edges of my vision as my G-suit struggled to keep blood in my brain. The lower MiG attempted to follow, but broke off as his aircraft approached its performance limits. The higher MiG dove to intercept my expected trajectory, but I was already rolling out of the climb, inverting the aircraft and pulling through in a maneuver that bled airspeed, but changed my direction unpredictably. Warning: airspeed critical, the automated system announced in my helmet. I ignored it, focused entirely on the dance of life and death playing out around me. Both MiGs momentarily lost visual contact, exactly what I needed. Dropping into the cloud layer below, I leveled off and cut my speed, becoming a ghost drifting through the murk. The clouds provided concealment, but flying blind had its own dangers. I relied on instruments alone. My situational awareness extended through the F-22's advanced sensor suite that could still track the MiGs above. They were circling now, searching, occasionally dipping into the clouds before pulling back up. Their frustration was almost palpable as they called to each other on open frequencies, their Russian communications easily picked up by my systems. No visual contact. Radar shows nothing. Could he have gone down? I smiled grimly as I plotted my next move. The primary objective was still achievable if I could maintain this deception. After 15 tense minutes, the MiGs finally turned back toward their base, fuel concerns likely forcing their hand. I waited an additional 10 minutes before cautiously emerging from the clouds at a different location, scanning constantly for threats. Clear skies greeted me. I'd won this round, but the encounter had cost precious time and fuel. More concerning was the question of how they'd detected me in the first place. Something about this mission didn't add up. The intelligence briefing had specifically indicated this route should have been clear of patrols. Was it coincidence, or had our operational security been compromised? These questions would have to wait. The primary objective lay ahead, the mysterious facility tucked into a remote valley that had suddenly become a priority target. As I adjusted course and checked my systems, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dogfight might have been the easiest part of what awaited me. The facility came into view exactly where intelligence said it would be, a sprawling complex nestled in a valley, partially built into the mountainside for protection. From my altitude, I could make out several large buildings, security perimeters, and what appeared to be a testing range. I activated the specialized reconnaissance package, its high-resolution cameras silently capturing images of everything below. The F-22 sensors were also collecting electronic emissions, communication signals, and other intelligence that would be analyzed back at base. Something about the layout struck me as familiar, though I couldn't immediately place why. I maintained a wide orbit, careful to stay high enough to avoid visual detection from the ground. The mission required 3 complete passes to ensure comprehensive coverage. On the second pass, I noticed unusual activity on the eastern edge of the complex. Vehicles moving rapidly, personnel running between buildings. Something had alerted them, though I was certain it wasn't my presence. The F-22 at this altitude would be nearly impossible to spot visually, and my electronic signature was minimal. Then I saw it, a large hangar door sliding open on the side of the mountain, revealing darkness within. My orders were explicit: document everything, but do not engage unless fired upon. I adjusted my position slightly to get a better angle on the opening hangar, my finger hovering near the camera controls to ensure we captured whatever emerged. What rolled out of that hangar sent a chill through me. An aircraft unlike anything in our intelligence briefings. Its configuration was bizarre, with forward-swept wings and what appeared to be multiple engine exhausts arranged in a circular pattern. This wasn't just an advanced fighter. It was something entirely new. I immediately designated it as a priority target for the reconnaissance systems, ensuring every detail was recorded. As I watched, the strange aircraft taxied toward what appeared to be a runway concealed by camouflage netting. They were preparing for a test flight, unaware that their secret was being compromised by my presence miles above. The implications were enormous. This could represent a technological leap that would shift the balance of power if deployed operationally. My threat receiver suddenly blared to life, surface-to-air missile systems activating below. They'd either spotted me or were engaging in routine protection for their precious prototype. Either way, my window of opportunity was closing fast. I completed the third pass under increasing danger, the reconnaissance systems capturing final critical details of the facility layout and the mysterious aircraft. As the first missile launch warning sounded, I banked hard away from the complex, simultaneously deploying countermeasures and diving toward lower altitude where the terrain would provide some cover. The mission was accomplished, but now came the equally important part: getting this intelligence back to our forces. Multiple missile contrails now streaked skyward, their deadly payloads seeking my heat signature. The relative calm of observation was shattered, replaced by the frantic calculations of survival as I pushed the F-22 to its limits. The first missile detonated uncomfortably close, the shockwave buffeting my aircraft like a violent turbulence. Alarms blared throughout the cockpit as I corkscrewed through the air, combining chaff, flares, and aggressive maneuvering to confuse the incoming threats. System damage detected. The computerized voice announced with maddening calmness. A quick scan of my instruments revealed hydraulic pressure dropping in the secondary systems. Not immediately critical, but concerning for the long journey home. 2 more missiles exploded nearby, their proximity fuses triggered by my countermeasures. I hugged the terrain, using the mountains to break radar lock whenever possible, the ground rushing past at terrifying speed. Radio silence was no longer a priority, survival was. Skywatch, this is Ghost Rider. I am compromised and under attack. Mission accomplished, return to base. I transmitted, knowing help would be hours away if it came at all. Roger, Ghost Rider, we copy. Be advised, additional hostiles launching from Airbase Sierra Niner. Recommend alternate extraction route Echo 3. The calm voice of the controller belied the dire situation. They were telling me that enemy fighters were scrambling from a base directly in my planned escape path. Route Echo 3 would take me over even more hostile territory before reaching friendly airspace, but it might avoid the immediate threat. I made the call instantly, banking hard toward the new heading while continuously scanning for threats. The damage to my aircraft became more apparent as I pushed it harder. The stick began to feel sluggish in certain maneuvers, and a persistent vibration suggested possible structural damage from the missile detonations. Fuel was becoming a concern too. The extended dogfight, and now this evasive routing would stretch my reserves to their absolute limits. I might need to consider options I'd hoped to avoid, like refueling at one of our forward operating bases, or even a controlled ejection in friendly territory if the aircraft became unflyable. Behind me, radar showed the scrambled enemy fighters searching the area I'd just vacated. They'd lost me for now, but their search pattern was expanding methodically. It was a temporary reprieve at best. 45 minutes of tense flying brought me to a particularly hazardous section of the route, a narrow valley between two mountain ranges heavily monitored by enemy air defenses. Threading through it would require absolute precision, but going around would add precious time and fuel I couldn't spare. As I approached the valley entrance, my threat receiver lit up again. They were waiting for me. Perhaps not specifically for me, but the defenses were active and alert. I reduced altitude further, now skimming just 100 feet above the valley floor, using terrain masking to stay beneath their radar coverage. The turbulence at this height was violent, throwing my damaged aircraft around like a toy and requiring every ounce of my concentration to maintain control. Sweat soaked my flight suit as I navigated the gauntlet, knowing that one mistake, one moment of inattention, would mean I'd never deliver the critical intelligence I carried. And somewhere ahead lay the border and relative safety. If I could reach it with my aircraft, my mission, and my life intact. The crossing into friendly airspace should have brought relief, but the damage to my F-22 was worsening. Multiple systems were now showing critical failures, and the airframe shuddered with increasing violence as metal fatigue spread from the initial damage points. Ghost Rider to any friendly units. I am declaring an emergency. I broadcast on the international distress frequency. My voice remained steady despite the cockpit around me coming apart piece by piece. The response was immediate. Ghost Rider, this is Archangel Flight. We have you on radar and are moving to escort. Nearest divert field is Blackstone, bearing 090, distance 30 miles. Through the canopy, I spotted two F-16s approaching rapidly, their familiar silhouettes a welcome sight after hours in hostile territory. The F-22's onboard systems continued their cascade of failures as we approached Blackstone. Hydraulic pressure was now critically low, flight controls becoming increasingly unresponsive. I may need to punch out. I informed my escorts, the ejection sequence already mentally rehearsed. We copy, Ghost Rider. Rescue assets are being scrambled now, came the response. The runway appeared ahead, tantalizing in its proximity, yet seemingly impossible to reach as my aircraft bucked and struggled against my inputs. I focused entirely on keeping the shuddering jet airborne for just a few more minutes, each second of victory against physics and the damage inflicted by the enemy missiles. The aircraft's flight recorder, the black box, was capturing everything from my control inputs to the system's failures, data that would prove invaluable regardless of the outcome. The landing gear refused to deploy fully, another critical failure to add to the growing list. Gear malfunction, I reported calmly, now committed to a belly landing if I could keep the aircraft level enough. The runway threshold passed beneath me as I nursed the dying aircraft down, trying to bleed off speed without losing what little control remained. Impact was violent, a screeching, grinding symphony of metal against concrete as the F-22's underside connected with the runway. Sparks flew past my canopy as the aircraft skidded forward, gradually slowing but remaining ominously intact. Fire crews raced alongside, foam cannons already dousing the aircraft to prevent the fuel from igniting. When the slide finally ended, I sat motionless for a moment, running through a mental checklist before popping the canopy and extracting myself from the cockpit. Hours later, in a secure debriefing room, I watched as technicians analyzed the black box data from my aircraft. The room fell silent as they played back the cockpit audio from my encounter with the prototype aircraft. "We've never seen anything like this," the intelligence officer said, pointing to enhanced images pulled from my reconnaissance package. "Your black box data confirms it. They've developed some kind of pulse technology that can momentarily degrade stealth characteristics. That's how they detected you despite the F-22's capabilities." The implications were staggering, a potential counter to our most significant tactical advantage. As they continued analyzing the data, I realized the true value of the mission went far beyond the images of the prototype. The fact that I'd been detected, engaged, and damaged provided critical information about emerging threats to our technological edge. Sometimes the most valuable intelligence comes not from what you observe, but from what observes you. As we've journeyed through this remarkable mission, from the unexpected assignment to the heart-stopping dogfight, the mysterious facility encounter, and finally the damaged return home, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The value of courage and intelligence in warfare is immeasurable. The black box data revealed not just a new enemy aircraft, but an entirely new detection technology that could have blindsided our forces if left undiscovered. What would you have done if placed in that cockpit? Would you have maintained your composure when those MiGs appeared out of nowhere? Could you have made the split-second decisions that meant the difference between mission success and failure? These are the questions that separate ordinary pilots from the exceptional ones, those who can think clearly while staring danger in the face. The revelations from this mission have already transformed our training protocols and defensive capabilities. But more importantly, they remind us that sometimes the most critical intelligence comes from what appears to be a near failure. The damage sustained, the detection experienced, these supposed setbacks provided invaluable data that pure success might never have revealed. Are you ready to apply this mindset to your own challenges? To recognize that sometimes the obstacles you face contain hidden opportunities? To understand that even when systems fail, human courage and adaptability can prevail? If today's story resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and activate notifications so you never miss another declassified mission breakdown. Your support allows us to continue bringing these crucial stories to light, stories that might otherwise remain forever sealed in classified archives. Until next time, this is Aerial Combat Archives, keeping history's most important missions alive.